Welcome to Come and See, your podcast for finding truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by Living Waters Abide Ministries. With host and founder, Richard Case, and co-host and retreat leader, Kathy Ricconi. Today is our special guest day, where we will hear from a friend in the ministry who will share their insight and stories on truth in this chaotic world. And now your host, Richard Case.
Well, welcome everybody. This is Guest Thursday, and this is a very special guest, and we purposely wanted to have Casey Mulligan back, who's a professor at the University of Chicago, has been associated with economics advisory at the White House, and you've served Trump. You also were Bush, right? Is anybody else that you've been an advisor?
I did not work with the Bush administration. They asked me twice, and what they were doing didn't really fit with what I'm good at, so I wasn't called to do that.
Okay. And you're a regular on Fox, right?
I don't know about regular. There's a lot of TV channels, so when they need somebody, I get calls, but I don't have a regular schedule on that.
Yeah, but they call you. So Casey has been given, just a great understanding of kind of keys to economics, and so we love having you on. Particularly, this will air the 10th and the 3rd and the 10th of October prior to the election. So we wanted Casey to kind of weigh in here and give us an update on the economics. He's a believer, he and his wife, which Linda and I know, and are just followers of God, and it's beautiful to walk with you. So I think, first of all, Casey, give us an update on, what are you doing? How's your work there at the university going? And then what kind of things have you been studying?
Yeah, now aside from a leave of absence in the administration, the University of Chicago is kind of my only job. And I'm not that young, so it's been a lot of years. But a lot's been going on at universities in the last year. But the University of Chicago, we have our Chicago Principles Calvin report that says the administration's not allowed to make political stances. That's for the individuals to do. And that's been a relief to those of us on the campus, but also a lot of students are attracted to that. So we've always had really good students, but now we're getting really amazing students who really embrace that pursuit of truth. So it's been really fun for me too. And our term's about to start here in about a week. Can't wait to get back with the students in classes and clubs, and it's a really fun thing.
So why is that fun for you?
Well, I guess I'm a nerd. I like learning. God's creation is nobody can understand it all, but He reveals a little bit what we can handle, and I enjoy that process.
Oh, that's great. Well, that's interesting. I didn't even think of it that way. That's kind of cool. So what classes are you teaching now? What level are you doing?
I teach the economics of socialism, which is a course actually I developed in the White House really for the president and his staff. But I thought, well, the students would like this, and they do. We have a really good time with that. I teach another course on public economics, which is more general about government policies rather than just socialist countries. And I help out in a course called Price Theory, which is even broader, about using more or less supply and demand to analyze economic issues, whether they be related to the government or not.
Yeah, no, that's cool. So is that all graduate level, or is it just undergraduate, or both? Or?
Well, I hope the students aren't watching, because I teach the same class to all levels without telling them. Our undergraduates are, they're really strong, so I don't have a watered down class for them. I do hit some more of these exotic topics for the undergrads because they're less specialized, like the socialism is an undergraduate class.
Yeah, that's great. Well, what, as you've been teaching and doing research, what have you understood right now in terms of the economic conditions of the United States or the world, and what new insight have you gained over the last couple of years as we head now into the election? Where are we with all this?
One thing that I've noticed, and it's changed a lot over a dozen years, and I didn't come to notice it until maybe 2 years ago, is the public sector unions, we call them. And that would be chiefly teacher union. There's also fire and police unions. They're not the unions that they were 12 years ago, where their main objective, they collect dues and they try to get higher salaries for their members. And they've now become political machines. And I recommend, it's a short book quick to read called Not Accountable by Philip Howard. And he kind of lays out the data on this. He also has a legal theory on how to deal with it. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know about that part. But it's a vicious cycle that you get these public sector unions. They get more power. They use that power to shape elections. And then they get their guy election or girl. And politicians give them more power. And it's a cycle. You left Illinois, Rich, but that's what's happened here now. We're a one-party state. In fact, in Chicago, what Philip describes in the book metaphorically is the union negotiating with the union. You have the mayor on one side of the table being bought by the union, and then the union on the other side of the table. Well, now in Chicago, our mayor is a union guy, a public sector union, teacher union leader. So now we have the teacher contract being negotiated between the teachers and the teachers. And the rest of us people have no place in there. So this is quite a trend. And it even happens in some red states as well. It's not so much a red and blue thing, although Illinois has been very extreme in that. So this is going to be a challenge on how we can have a more democratic system with more than one party going against each other when they have these kind of trends. So that's something I'm watching very closely.
As you start to look at that, what are some of your thoughts about the impact of that?
Well, competition is a hallmark throughout our lives. Having more than one church to go to can help keep both churches doing a good job. Having more than one grocery store and having only one political party means a very bad product. Aside from all the other problems that government usually has trouble doing a good job, when they don't have competition, they don't have a threat from some opponents who are going to offer something different, or at least claim they're going to offer something different, you get quite bad results. And this is more well known in public schools. One of the major things that local governments do, public schools in the major cities like Chicago are doing a terrible job. 20-30% of Chicago public school teachers are chronically absent.
No.
I mean, forget about the quality of what they're teaching. They fall into the chronically absent category. Also, the quality of what they teach isn't very good. So many of the students are not successful who go to those schools, hitting their benchmarks on learning math and reading and things like that. So that lack of competition, we want competition throughout our activities, and we're not getting in the government area as long as this trend continues to take hold.
So you're saying that if you didn't show up teaching your class 30% of the time, you mean the students might not learn as much?
Well, it's 30% of the teachers are chronically absent. Now, I don't know what chronically absent has a specific union definition. It may be missing 20 days in the school year or something like that.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. What, as you look at that overall trend politically, what do you see as the economic impact of that potentially for states and for cities, et cetera?
There's a lack of, the government sector is not, which is part of our economy, maybe too big a part, but it's part of our economy, is not doing its job. And then you have, that has all its kind of problems. If public school students aren't learning, that has problems. If we're not having police protection, that has problems, as we know in Illinois and Colorado. Car theft is a major issue out where you guys are. So that I can tell you another story in Washington, D.C. I was on leave there for a year. I lived there. I thought I knew it very well. I walked the same street between the White House and my apartment for a year, so hundreds of times. And I went back in the last year, and I was lost. I needed the Google Maps because all the retail is gone. Whoa. So when my rule of thumb is I walk and at the noodle place, I'm going to turn right. And at the CVS, I'm going to turn left. They're all gone. Now they've kind of decorated the glass windows of the vacant places with like scenes of, beaches and woods and things like that, which is different than Chicago. We have vacant streets like that where it's just says for lease out there. But retail has disappeared from Washington, D.C. And it's a vicious cycle because, and I asked, I was there to visit, people who work there. And I asked, well, there's nowhere to eat anymore. We bring our own lunch. Number one, because there's not places to eat. And number two, the crime's a problem because there's nobody out there. And of course, if you run a restaurant, you have the double whammy that people aren't coming into the city anymore. And then except the criminals. And then, they're not fighting crime in Washington, D.C., even worse than Chicago, maybe even as bad as in Colorado.
Did you see, is this the timing of this lining up with as things closed down in COVID and then cities degenerated from that point? Is that kind of the point
COVID
you see that starting?
would be a big factor and a breaking point, although not in other countries. Other countries had COVID and they haven't quite had this crime issue like we have, and this movement toward not enforcing
Right.
penalties and things. So that's a bit US centric, but the timing is definitely in the pandemic. And then you have, a lot of people in DC are government employees, and the government discovered work from home and they kind of like it. And so there's still an awful lot of work from home in the government sector. There are some government employees that I know, they go like twice a year into the office. So that's having an impact on DC as well, that just a low population level in the sense of, who's present at 11 a.m. on a Wednesday.
Yeah. What two questions is what is driving them to vacate, which you said crime is one of them, and then what then is the economic impact? Second question, what's the economic impact of that to the city if they shut down? So what's causing that? Is it just crime? Are there other economic factors? And then what's the impact of that?
Well, it's crime and the other people not being in there. I mean, the point of being in a city is to be near the other people. That's sometimes why we leave the city too, because there are so many people. But if you're in a city, there's a whole range of opportunities there, whether you're seeking partners in a business transaction or, want to purchase a certain type of good. The city's going to have it all. And the bigger the city, the more true. Of course, the ultimate in that kind of dimension. So if the city doesn't have people in it, then what's the point of going there? It's still expensive. There are some cities who've been on the decline, like Detroit, because of industrial trends. But that's not DC. I mean, the government is thriving. I mean, it's flush with money. So that's not really the issue in DC. It would be a combination of crime, and then that other people aren't. This is not good for younger people. I mean, younger people are in a learning phase of their life, especially after they graduate. I work in a university, and I don't want to belittle what we teach in university, but so much learning happens in your job after you've got your last diploma. And that's coming from older people with wisdom and experience. And the work from home is really cheating the younger people. They're at home by themselves. They're not getting these informal interactions. We're pretty confident that's not good for their capabilities. And I think we're seeing a lot of industries making mistakes they didn't used to make. You remember the Bud Light episode? Terrible marketing decision. Right. And I bet work from home contributed to that. That was done by a younger person, 30-something decision, and there wasn't a 50 or 60-something, overseeing and say, what, maybe we want to think twice before we roll that out. And that brand was ruined. And, you have ships crashing into bridges. And I think this is all indicative of a failure to pass down knowledge across the generations. And work from home is a factor. Pandemic would be a factor too. And if the person, a 60-something person dies with that knowledge, that also doesn't get passed on. So, but in my field, we call it human capital. And it's a human capital issue. It's not being accumulated and passed on at the rates that it was in the past. And you have companies like Citadel. Actually, Citadel fits, Ken Griffin's Citadel fits both of the topics we're hitting on here. He left Chicago because of the crime, left Chicago because of the teacher union. Ken's kids and my kids went to the same school, private school, but unionized, and not good teaching coming from those union members. And it was easy to leave, and the kids were not impressed with their teachers, and so they left for Florida. But one of the policies that Ken had in Citadel, even before they left Chicago, was we're working in person. We have a lot of knowledge in our business. We love bringing on talented young people, but they have things to learn, and it's not going to learn unless we're all together in the office. Within weeks of COVID, they were down in, I believe it was in Palm Beach, with the trading floor they set up for everyone to be together.
That's really interesting. And what do you feel is the impact as we lose that, what you call human capital, which makes sense? What will be the impact of all that? Is it that continues on, which looks like, it was. I know some companies are trying to have people back a little bit more than they are, but they're still allowing remote work. So,
well, there are two sides to it. One would be if you're not learning, your wage isn't going to go up. I mean, your wage is basically based on or heavily supported by your capabilities. And if you're not acquiring capabilities the way that your father or your uncle, your mom did when they were working, don't expect your wage to grow at that rate. And we've seen that wages have not grown a lot since the end of the pandemic, really. And that would be a factor. Now, the other side of the work from home is not going to go away because it does provide opportunities to include people for whom commuting is particularly costly.
Sure.
And somebody taking care of kids or mother at home, elderly mother at home or something. These are people who might be doing formal employment that wouldn't have absent the work from home. Now, those tend to be lower skill positions because they like being at home to be able to do the home duties, but then they're not getting the learning that we talked about earlier. So you might get more employment out of that, what I'm saying, but lower wages.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question just when you were talking about the decline of the cities and what Chicago is looking like now? What would you say, like I'm just thinking from a professor standpoint, you have studied cycles of this before. Have you seen this in history before? And what is the outcome of that? And how did we come back from that?
That's a really great question. And then looking at history, I think is informative that COVID was not the first disease or even the most severe disease that's raged through America or countries before. In each of those episodes, the city was proclaimed dead. What's the Mark Twain saying? The premature announcement of my death. I think that's true with cities as well. Now, it takes some time for them to bounce back. And the ones that bounce back may be different than the ones that were there before. So you could have some cities that don't take the right approach and people decide, well, Dallas is going to be our city or Austin or something like that. So I do predict cities will come back for the reasons we talked about, that being with people has a lot of value and the city is a great opportunity for that. Doesn't mean you have to be in the city every day. Doesn't mean you have to be in the city your entire life, but to have a part of your week or a part of your lifetime where in the city, people are going to value that for the foreseeable future.
Yeah. What, as you look at the current trend of exiting, what does that do then to the city itself relative to tax receipts, and what are they then having to keep trying to raise taxes so that the people there are paying more? Because I know in New York City, that's I've read a lot about that they just keep getting more and more taxes, which is actually driving them to want to leave faster. So is that what's happening, or what do you see there?
Yeah, that's kind of a spiral that can happen. I mean, anytime you have some kind of shared cost, you want to have the group large to spread it across many members, if you will. I mean, cities don't have memberships, but you want to have a larger group.
Yeah.
So when the group shrinks, then you have trouble covering that cost, and then more people want to leave. Now, cities have some natural costs, having an airport, things like that. But we were talking about earlier, these public sector unions have laid a very big bill. They're not very productive. And that cost needs to be spread. And so you get spread over fewer and fewer people to pay, the pensions for the public sector unions. That can lead to a spiral because people who leave Chicago and move to Indianapolis are not obligated to contribute any of their funds anymore to teacher union and things like that. So that may be, in a sense, a solution or a mitigating factor around the public sector union problem that we talked about. I don't know what the solution is, but the localities and states that find the solution may find themselves gobbling up all the population.
Do you think that trend will continue so that large cities will start to accelerate decline, and it'll happen for a while until other factors finally move it the other direction? But do you foresee, like, San Francisco, Chicago, Los Angeles, New York, are they gonna accelerate their decline because of that spiral that they're in?
Well, I think it's been already accelerated. We've seen really remarkable outpopulation movements from those cities. It's not their largeness per se. I think it's their legacy. I think we can have large cities, but maybe tend to be newer ones. What do these cities offer? Chicago's very central. So no matter how bad the mayor of Chicago is, he can't squander our geographic location. And I certainly appreciate that as an asset. I can go to Midway and go almost anywhere in the country other than the West Coast same day, have a full set of meetings, come back, sleep in my own bed. I mean, it's a pretty attractive, the centrality part. Now, some of the cities you mentioned aren't central, so they don't have that advantage. The universities. Now, the university sector is in a kind of turmoil, but what has been viewed traditionally as the top universities tend to be near these bigger cities, near Boston, near Chicago, San Francisco. Can the other areas of the country step up with world-class universities? I bet they will, but that's not something that happens overnight. A lot of people say it takes 100 years. I don't agree with that. The University of Chicago became world-class within about 25 years. But I think in that kind of time frame, that'll be one of the last assets of some of the cities you mentioned, Rich, if they lose the world-class universities. And there's always some sign of that those universities aren't functioning well. One of my sons is applying for colleges now, and Clemson University down in South Carolina, getting all kind of applications from New England. People who would have been applying to the Ivy League New England schools are unhappy with the performance, and they're coming down to a Southern school, Clemson. So that could happen even quicker than I think.
Yeah, interesting. Well, Casey, thank you so much for your insight here. We're going to have you back next week. We'd like to talk about the state of the economy right now, the U.S. full economy, and then talk a little bit about the potential policies. We have an election coming up. We have on one side, Harris, on the other side, Trump. I know you're a student of overall policy. We would like to discuss a little bit about what may be the outcome if either one of those get in and how that would look. So we'd love to come back and catch up next time. Thank you so much for this insight. And it's great to kind of explain things that we can observe it. We just wonder what's really happening, where it's going to go. And so thank you so much for your insight. So Heavenly Father, we just thank you for Casey and his ability to observe and articulate what's going on, and may we understand the impact of that where we live, and how we can let you guide us and lead us. And we thank you in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. Well, Casey, it is always a pleasure to have you here and just to have your insight. So thanks again. And to our listeners, thanks for joining us. If you have questions from today's broadcast, be sure to send them in to us at questions@abideministries.com. And we look forward to seeing you next time.
Yep. We'll see you then.
Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Come and See, your podcast for truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by Living Waters Abide Ministries. Send us your questions and comments and tune in tomorrow for more answers to your personal questions about living life in God's truth. Remember, God's will is best and none better. His truth brings peace in this world of chaos.